It's certainly a pleasure for me to join Heather, Emily, and Kim on this panel. Throughout the day, you're going to hear several words thrown around. In fact, you've already heard many of them. Words such as engagement, impact, collaboration, and partnership. As Steve alluded to in his opening remarks, we've come a long ways from the days of checkbook philanthropy, where there was a transaction of the nonprofit coming to the corporation, convincing them of their need, and then hoping to get a check in return. And that was the end of the partnership or end of the relationship. What we're really talking about now is creating a partnership of equal partners. And so that's what we're going to talk about on this panel today, is how do we think about this partnership that can exist between companies and nonprofit organizations, each one bringing value to the equation. When I started in this business, I think Steve's the only one that's maybe been in the business a little bit longer. I'll never forget when I was out doing some fundraising for a nonprofit organization, someone referred to me as the beggar, because I was out with my hand out asking people to give money. We've certainly moved far beyond that today. And so I'm anxious to share the discussion with these three. Let me, before I introduce them, just tell you, I've had the chance to work with all three. They are leaders. They get it. They're at the forefront of this thinking of how do you engage nonprofits in a meaningful way and recognize the value that they're bringing and how you can work together in a collaborative partnership to make impact and to make a difference in the lives. So let me first introduce to you Emily Simone. Emily is with Lockheed Martin. She serves as Director of Global Community Outreach and as indicated, serves on the Community First Board. Heather Lofgren-Wright with PricewaterhouseCoopers, Corporate Responsibility Director. And then our own Kimberly Young, Vice President at America's Charities. And so what we'd like to do today is to give each of them a chance to just kind of share their vision and some thoughts with you from their perspectives, and then we'll have a chance after all three to respond to questions. So if you'll hold your questions until they're all done. We're first going to hear from Heather, and so Heather, we'll turn the time to you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone at America's Charities, Steve, George, for hosting today. It's really a pleasure to be here, and thank you for that introduction to cue up this conversation, Steve. I thought it might be useful to talk a little bit about how I'm presently seeing the corporate stage in this arena. So just a little snapshot. This slide is a demonstration of two things. The first being how much you can cram into one slide. And I'm not going to read it to you, but because I know you can all do that for yourselves. But basically looking at if you can distinguish the different graphics here. This one called opportunity that runs along this line. Just looking at where we've come. I've been with PwC for 17 years. And I was always involved in our community programs, even when I worked in our marketing and sales team, and just became part of our national corporate responsibility team just these past 5 years. And so I have lived, as many of you have, this evolution from more traditional philanthropy, having its roots in what Steve was just describing, moving on to this shared value concept, or the triple bottom line, profits, planet, people, looking at how our efforts add up across all those stakeholder groups. And then finally, most recently, looking at how some corporate organizations are actually able to not just evolve this, but actually revolutionize how this is being done. So this becomes a conversation about the entire supply chain or your complete business model, how this strategy changes maybe your product and service offerings, and how it can be embedded in every part of your business. And it leads to things like complete innovation or co-creation, looking at consumers in a different way as a complete different stakeholder group. So the conversation around this is really changing. And so while the expectations of these corporate or corporate social responsibility programs in the corporate sector are evolving, so too is the expectation around reporting. So we've already heard several comments this morning about the importance of impact, being able to demonstrate the return on investment in this space. And so if you look at these two bottom charts here, they tell quite a story about how, just in the past decade or so, the number of organizations that are reporting beyond financial reporting, the number of organizations that are reporting with the, I don't think I've written out CDP here, but it's the Carbon Disclosure Project. So it used to be that talking about what you're doing was a nice thing to do or an extra or a bonus, and more it's absolutely expected, not only that you're reporting, but that you're doing so with quite a level of transparency and have a real impact story to tell. So with those two shifts in increased expectation of what these programs bring, plus increased expectation around reporting, we're seeing the C-suite take a different interest in this whole conversation and really start to own this or drive this. So it's interesting, when I would go to conferences, even just 5 years ago, a very popular question in the audience was, how'd you get your CEO's support for this program? And that conversation is starting to shift to, my CEO expects all these things of me, how do I get it done? And it's fantastic that we have the interest and support more and more from that group, but so too do the expectations increase, right? So I'm a huge fan of Venn diagrams as a visual representation of a win-win, or in this case, win-win-win concept. There are many, I'm sure you've all seen them, illustrating the different stakeholder groups in this space and how to find that sweet spot where there's something in it for everyone. The reason I think this particular one is interesting is more and more from the perspective of a CEO. They're looking at what can their organization get out of this in terms of brand and reputation? Like, how do we fit in with that continuum on the last slide? Like, how are we showing up in our industry with our clients or consumers? They're also looking at, how does this engage my employees? How does this help me recruit and retain the people who are the right fit for my organization, as well as this third bucket of efficiency, looking at, are there cost savings associated with this? We see that a lot in the green space, right? That sometimes as you reduce waste, you also reduce expenses, but even just the overall efficiencies. And so when you look at these pieces in tandem, if I'm you, and I'm not trying to alarm anybody, but I'm thinking you could say, well, where are our community collaborators in this space? Where are the nonprofit organizations in this model? And so again, what I think is significant about this particular Venn representation of this conversation is that it's focused quite internally. So CEOs in the C-suite are looking more and more to their managers to say, what are you doing in this space? So where we may have in the past gone to nonprofit organizations to say, what do you do and can you help me be a part of that? A lot of that conversation is happening internally now to say, what should we be doing? What is material to our business, to our stakeholder groups? What do our employees care about? The third employee point came to me, and it's about even using these to develop the staff that you have, develop more leadership roles, get them thinking about this too. So these are more the questions that we're asking internally first. And so in addition to this CEO or C-suite perspective, I just want to call out too that there's still some chicken egg in this, in that it's very much both a top-down and bottom-up approach. So while the C-suite is often defining the strategy and why this is important to the business, the materiality, it is our people as a whole. So I'll speak for myself at PwC. We have 40,000 people in the US firm, and the majority of that group now is millennials, and that population grows daily, right? More millennials coming in, more boomers retiring. So it's absolutely essential that we are also hearing from them what's important to them. This is a two-way conversation, and the only way we're going to make this shift along that continuum we looked at on slide 1 is if we're involving both groups in the dialogue. So top down, bottom up, everyone coming together to try to define this for the organization. So when I think about my role at PwC, I often define it as, to myself, like when I sit down at my desk in the morning and say, what am I going to accomplish today? I think it's my job to help busy people give back in easy yet very meaningful ways. Because I want to get everything out of that Venn diagram. I want it to work for my people. I want it to work for my leadership. I want it to work for the community. So I'm thinking about what are those on-ramps. So when I'm thinking about either program development or organizations that I'm going to collaborate with. This is kind of what is going on. If you can think of this circle over here as, you know, a bubble coming out of my head. These are the questions I'm asking myself. So we have 5 public corporate responsibility goals for our US firm, and one of them is to get 100% of our people engaged in corporate responsibility. That's part of this, you know, embedded model, right, where it's not a side dish. This is a part of who we are. It's part of our corporate culture. So to do that, and this is from our FY14 report, so this is where we stood as of last June 30th, hoping to come in to exceed these numbers for this fiscal year. But basically, I'm asking myself, are the opportunities we're looking at aligned with those 5 goals? And they're roughly, the shorthand is written out here. For the sake of time, I won't take you through them, but we can talk about them later, or you can look them up online if you're interested. But basically, everything I'm doing, I'm thinking, how do they relate back to these 5 public commitments we have? Are there multiple on-ramps for our people to get involved? So this is something when Steve was talking about how you have this strong program going and then all of a sudden it erodes, and why. We're not looking for one-off opportunities, which is another bullet here, I think, but instead, if there are multiple connection points, so if I'm looking across the US, how our footprint overlaps with an organization we're working with, can I have people in my local offices on local boards of that organization? Is there an opportunity to give donations from our people, from our firm? Are there volunteer opportunities? And are they truly meaningful to both parties in this? And not everything has to be working on every cylinder, but the more connection points we have, the more both of us are going to get out of that relationship and the time and the money that's committed there. So I'm also looking at, you know, again, with that old model of coming to a nonprofit organization and saying, tell me about what you do and can we sign up, I'm thinking more and more, what do we bring to the table? Is there something extraordinary that we can accomplish? Can we really change the conversation or move the needle on this because we came together on this? So as opposed to like, Heather, just sign up here and we'll get your people doing this thing that everyone else is doing. I'm really interested in, you know, what's the mark we leave? And that's part of that continuum from slide 1 too, right? That if we're still just signing up and showing up, then we're not changing the paradigm in a way that's going to make that evolutionary change. So also just looking at, you know, like that leadership development comment earlier, or I think affinity networks. Like, what is it that my people really care about, and what do they want to connect on? Again, with that, hearing what the millennials are talking about, and making sure that we hit on more cylinders. So what are other things that this program could potentially achieve? Not trying to water it down so it tries to be all things to all people, but just really thinking about what is that overlap and fit. And then ultimately, how do I report back to my people as individuals, but also my leadership team on a firm-wide level, what the value of this program is? What did it achieve internally for the firm, externally for the community? Have we moved the needle? The more we can tell that story, that's, again, part of what makes it very sustainable, right? That if people feel that they're making change, they'll tell their friends about it, and then their friends want to be a part of it. If our leadership sees that it is actually helping us meet multiple goals, it is getting that brand enhancement, it is creating efficiencies or cost savings, it is exciting our people, then that's what's going to help me get their repeated support to continue these kinds of programs. So that's my short spiel,
Great.
Steve, on where my head's at
Great.
these days on this.
Thank you, Heather. Again, we'll hold questions, but a couple of key points that I thought Heather made, which I just want to emphasize before we move on, is she gave us specific examples of moving beyond kind of the transactional relationship between corporation and nonprofit to that partnership where it's integrated throughout the organization and embedded. And you can't do that through a one-time, one single event. And it's how do we create these partnerships and then transform those partnerships throughout the firm on a nationwide basis. So a couple of key things that I just picked up from her that I thought I just wanted to emphasize. Kimberly Young is with America's Charities, and I guess is representing the nonprofit side on this panel today. So Kimberly, let's hear from you.
So thank you, Steve. And what you'll hear from me is a lot of what Heather said, but we did something a little bit different. We are anchoring the research aspect in between, and so I'm going to represent a little bit of the research that validates some of the things that Heather has talked about already. We talked about the changes in the paradigm shift. So this slide that's up now gives you some of a viewpoint on that paradigm. This is from a research report that was done when I was at the Council on Foundations prior to coming to America's Charities. And the council took a look at 500 or so corporations across the country, as well as corporate foundations, to see what was going on. And a lot of the things that Heather just spoke about are what they described. In this research, we learned that the paradigms were shifting in multiple ways. But one of the key things that we learned was about who's driving this paradigm shift. And so I just want to pose a question to you all first before I go further. Who do you think is driving this shift in paradigm? Do you think that it's the businesses that are driving it? Show of hands. Do you think society's driving it? Okay. It's actually society that's driving this paradigm shift. And so as businesses have become more influential, society's expecting more from the business community. And as Heather described, society is expecting that the business community not only contribute jobs and quality products and such, but also that they invest in communities in multiple ways, not just dollars, but also utilizing the talents and the expertise and the competencies that are embedded within the business to support the society. So when you look at what's here on this chart, you'll see the shift from the charity mindset to the investment mindset, and you'll hear that threaded throughout our dialogue today. Heather mentioned not so much transactional, but focus more on relationships. The shift from needs to outcomes has impacted how we measure things and how we need to relate on both sides of the coin, the nonprofits as well as the businesses, in terms of achieving or reaching common goals around measurement even before you enter into a project. It's not no longer an isolated activity. The activities are aligned and integrated and embedded in the business. And then, as we said, also, there was one time when we focused on cash and employees, and now you see the full value chain, as Heather also described. In America's Charities Snapshot Report reflects the same things as we've learned from the business community. So when we look at what companies are asking for and what companies are expecting in the workplace, it's no longer asking whether or not employees should participate. It's also asking how they can maximize their efforts throughout their employee engagement, employee giving programs. Businesses are seeking ways to engage employees to donate dollars and to donate their expertise. Employees are looking for technology to capture their personal giving, as well as to engage their colleagues in real time. So we see things like the ALS Challenge and other types of events where it's in real time, let me get you involved now. Employees also want to improve their company's products and services, and they want to use the same skills and abilities that they use to improve their products and services to also improve what's going on in the community and the communities that they live and work in. The top components this drives the top components of the future campaigns. So employees have a unique position of influence. We said, again, the society is driving this. The employees, all the people that we work for or work with, and all of us in this room are part of the society that's driving this change. What this means is that when we look at workplace giving and payroll contributions, we're looking at multiple ways that employees can give. Can they give through their payroll deductions? Can they give through writing a check? Can they use their mobile device? Can they do a credit card payment? How can they give back? So cash contributions and how we even engage around that is looking a lot different. They also want to be involved and with the company. So more emphasis is being placed on matching gifts, dollars for doers, and those types of programs that engage employees with the company, both for the things that the company cares about, but even more so giving the employees choice throughout, that they can select and pick those issues that are important to them or that they're already connected to on a personal level. They also expect that the business articulates their goals very clearly. So Heather's goals, as she described, were very clear and in a way that they can see their role and their place in it and help drive that forward. Year-round giving and giving vehicles that look more like a 401k plan investment is also something that we're seeing more of and hearing more. People want that kind of need. They want an account that they can deposit money into on an ongoing basis and then direct it to where they want it to go. So we talk about shared values and what a shared or mutual benefit partner relation looks like. I like this Venn diagram because it brings all of these pieces together. Taken together, the expectations of society, the expectations of the business, the expectations of the company and employees, along with the expectations that the nonprofits have and the communities that you're serving and the clients that you're working with. So when we bring all of those ideas and all of those assets, all of that competency together, we can achieve more. And so you see both the nonprofits and companies looking at how can we work together in a mutually beneficial way. There's no one size fits all in this, so I want to preface what I'm about to say by that. Because when we look at shared value initiatives, sometimes people think that, well, what happens when you have a disaster and you don't necessarily have a partnership already in place, but you need to respond and react. What happens to strategic philanthropy that is not as focused on making a large-scale social change? What happens to those areas? And from our perspective, when we talk about these mutually beneficial or shared value or collective impact type of partnerships, it's not in the vein to replace, but to enhance and to have deeper impact as you evolve a partnership, or as you evolve a relationship. So some of the components that are really important are that you come together around common issues and identify from the very beginning what are the shared goals and what are the things that you want to achieve, both the nonprofit and the business together. What are the assets that you each bring to the table that would help to advance this issue, build awareness, and inform and engage others? And what is the outcome that you want to arrive at the end of the game? What is the common goal that you want to achieve overall? To be effective, shared value engagement should also be viewed as integral to the organization. So board commitment, board support and buy-in, senior leadership buy-in threaded throughout in order to support these types of efforts. These are long-term relationships. They're not short-term relationships. And so, as we said, developing the strategies or developing an integrated approach to catalyze or to move the needle forward on that issue is what shared value is about. Mobilizing partners and making a deeper impact on those issues of concern to both the business and to the nonprofit organizations and your communities.
Thank you, Kim. If I had to take one takeaway from Kim's presentation and building upon what Heather said, it would be together we're stronger than we are apart. And recognize that the corporation brings a certain amount of assets being money, assets being expertise, assets being employees and resources and talents and interests, and the nonprofits, and by collaborating together. But that's not easy to do. Now, I'm not going to steal from Emily because we haven't prepped this, but Emily, I know I've heard her speak before, talks about the dialogue that has to exist between the company and the nonprofit to identify what are those mutual interests and how do we work together. So Emily Simone, Lockheed Martin.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I think you've heard a lot this morning, both on this panel and from Steve and George, about the changing expectations from the corporate perspective. And what I thought might be helpful, given what you've just heard from Heather and Kim, is to walk you through what that's meant for one particular company, in this case Lockheed Martin, where I work and I lead our efforts in the community. So I always find having that illustration really starts to drive things home. So I thought I'd walk you through our evolution and how we're looking at it and what we're looking for. So just to ground it, this is our commitment to the community. So we do want to be that good neighbor and that good partner, but we want to be very specific about what we're trying to achieve. We do know that there's an intersection between what we offer as a company and what the community needs, and where the Venn diagram, I have terrible ones, so I took it out, but in that intersection in the middle.
Kim's is the prettiest.
Yeah, mine would be the worst. That's where we want to be. And so about 3 years ago, you'll see in a second when I walk you through our evolution, we went through a very thoughtful process, talked to a lot of stakeholders, we talked to our customers, we talked to our employees, we benchmarked, we went out and we looked and we said, what can we do to make an impact? We need to be very specific and very focused. So at our heart, we're an engineering company that defines innovative technology. We help put people in space. We help advanced aeronautics, et cetera. We're an innovation company. We're a company of engineers. So of our 112,000 employees, 5,600 of them, half, are engineers, scientists, and technologists. STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math, is a workforce need for us. We need more of them, and if you study any of the trends, you know there are not enough engineers coming out of college for companies like us. It's a workforce issue, and we've got a lot to bring. The other half of our portfolio is supporting the military and veteran community. Again, many of the service members, both here in the United States and deployed around the world, are using our services and products, and about a quarter to a third of our workforce once wore the uniform of the United States or our allies. So again, another community that's very important to us and where we bring a lot of assets. So we said, this is what we're going to be. And now what we're doing is bringing all of the resources of the company to bear on those two issues. We do it through the pillars. And so we look at it both on an individual employee perspective, but also on the cash that we can bring. And that's both our employees, our leaders, our teams, as well as our corporate resources. And it's along the continuum of that chart up there is what we look for when we go to partners. So when we go to partners, we want to know, how can we support you philanthropically? How can we bring our employees? How can we bring our teams? How can we bring our leaders? If we're going to be a really deep and long-term and impactful partner for you, we know that it's more than just our cash assets we have. To what Heather said, how can we help you make that impact that's of mutual benefit for both of us? How can we really start to change the equation? So we've done this, and here's where you'll see. I would say, we've really focused on those two issues, but that even wasn't enough for us. We said STEM. So we do about 30 million in giving a year, about half of which dedicated to this. So if you consider that between 10 and 12 million, while it sounds like a lot, I think you all know that these are some pretty deep and entrenched impacts, and 12 million really isn't going to make that much of a difference. So we really also had to be very focused about what did we mean when we meant these two issues. So when I said STEM is a workforce issue for us, that's how we looked at it. We looked at it in the lens of our workforce, and we sat down with the HR team and we said, what do you need? And they said, we need a bigger pipeline. Well, if you look at the pipeline of STEM, the best way to do it is to look at getting more girls and more minorities into it. And so that's where we're putting our money. We're putting our money into getting girls excited about STEM, which means looking at it from a different vantage point than most nonprofits have traditionally. And we're looking at how can we really invest in urban cores where the minority students aren't getting the advantages that some of the suburban communities are. And so it's really defined our giving strategy, and that drives everything else. We're going to less grants, but at a much larger level, and we're really looking at the impact that they're driving, looking up front at the logic models and looking at the back end of how they're measuring outputs and how you can safely say what this intervention has done over the life of a child or of a service member or of a transitioning vet. And that has really driven a very different conversation with our nonprofits and a selection of different nonprofits. And I think, as Steve alluded to, it's not easy. It's not a one-size-fits-all. There's not one number. But it really does make you start to think about those conversations and about how employees feed into the impact you're going to have. On the employee side, as I mentioned, we've got 56,000 engineers, scientists, and technology. So for us, they're a resource. If you know anything about STEM, you know that you're very unlikely to become an engineer if you don't know one, you don't have a role model, you don't have a mentor. We've got 56,000 of them. How do we use those in alignment with our partners? And so we've started to drive new programs. We've got a great one where we're taking our female engineers and our female leaders and the resource groups, partnering them with an organization very focused on girls and on minority girls. And now we've got mentors who look and who aspire, who are like what the girls aspire to be, and it's turning into a really powerful partnership. And we're doing that across the line. We've got 22,000 veterans who've transitioned themselves. We're turning them into mentors for the hundreds of thousands of service members who are moving into the civilian sector, and that drives a very different perspective from our nonprofit engagements. So we have a whole new crew of organizations that we're beginning to support. And it's not easy. It's hard for us. We know it's hard for you, and we know it's an evolution, but we've learned a lot, and I think we've driven a lot of change as a result of that. And then for us, like many companies, we're growing internationally. And so what we do here in the United States isn't going to translate. And so how do we use it as a basis of discussion, but really think about how do we do this in a country for their needs and for our employees' needs over there. And that's a journey we've just begun over the last few years, but it's one that's taking an increasing amount of time. And if you talk to our peers in the corporate sector, it's something that they're really thinking about. But at the end of the day, as you see in the takeaway, this is all about impact. We've picked our issues. How do we have the best impact we have with the resources we have at our fingertips? So how do you all fit in? First of all, and this is, again, it's very focused on where we are at Lockheed Martin, but this is going to be true for all corporate partners. What are their issues, and how do you align with them? So your best place is to find the causes that you are making a difference in, and find the companies who are just as committed to them. So that's kind of the first thing in the gate. The next thing is, are you making a difference? Can you demonstrate the impact you have? Okay, you get through those. How do you look strategically at the rest of the assets of the corporation? It's not just money anymore, but how do you look at their peoples? How do you look at their leaders? How do you look at their platforms and the advocacy that they bring? And how do you put together a total package? And then how do you find it to do it in an iterative, collaborative fashion? So what we started with that organization around girls, I said, we started here, we're going here, and our ultimate aspiration is to be much higher. But we know that takes time, and it takes a lot of really honest feedback. And so we have very truthful conversations where they said, hey, look, it's working here and it's not working here, and let me tell you why it's working here and why it's not working here. And this is what we're gonna need you to do, and we say the same thing to them. But that's how we grow, and that's how we know we're really making a difference, and you can see it in the results that we mutually have.
Great.
Very cool.
Thank you. That great example of showing how Lockheed Martin has adapted and the kind of dialogue that goes on. Let's open it up. Any questions that you have for any of our three panelists? Steve has one.
Well, I wrote a bunch of them. Let me, oh, sorry. So you started to talk about it a little bit, Emily, about what can charities do? And I think maybe I'm looking for maybe a little deeper dive. And maybe it may not be just what Lockheed does. It could be geared at anybody on the panel. But so put yourself in the shoes of the people in this room who are going to be as varied in their job as maybe manager of workplace giving, right up to chief of development to maybe CEO of a nonprofit. So what specifically can nonprofits do from their end to activate a more robust relationship with a company, particularly when your first touch point is inside out?
So, I mean, I'll sort of start, and I always ground it in, know who you're approaching. So, I get called all day long, as I'm sure Heather does, from folks who want to talk to me and my team. And I'm much more likely to call someone back. I'll say a few things. It's very rare these days, the honest truth, it's very rare these days that we partner with someone that we haven't found. The days of waiting for people to come to us are over. we've established what we want to do, and now I view it as my and my team's job to go find those organizations. So sometimes we'll get phone calls and I'll say, we've been admiring you from afar. But if we haven't been admiring you from afar, the door is even higher, which means you guys have to do your homework. You have to understand where we're trying to go and how you can insert yourselves. And you have to know it's probably going to take a while because our plates are full and we've got a good set of partners. And so while we'll always evaluate more, you're going to have be persistent and be smart about how you do it.
No, that's exactly right. I get a surprising number of emails or phone calls about programs that aren't related to anything we do and might even be in a part of the world where we have no footprint. And it's a waste of their time and my time to go through that conversation over and over again. And I think part of the good news about this increase in reporting and transparency is that that information is easier and easier to find too. So I find when someone comes to me, and in fact, Steve, if I can just call you out, one of the things I love is, we have this big focus on financial literacy, and Steve will send me articles that he finds on financial literacy. Steve and I have a relationship, and we could reach out to each other about anything, but having that specific touch point in this area that is of mutual interest, I know that he's thinking about what's on my mind and that he understands what's on my mind. And I think that really goes a long way. And even, I think there can be value that's not as obvious sometimes as well. I had someone find me through mutual contact on LinkedIn and reach out to me to talk about ideas she had in her new role in a large national nonprofit organization that wasn't at all related to what I'm doing, but she was looking for just a 30-minute sounding board on this type of discussion and wanted my thoughts from what I see and hear at conferences. And that's the beginning of her and I developing a relationship as well, that, who knows where she is in a future career and I am in a future career. But it's those concrete, sincere, relationship developing nuggets that start that. And then I think when you can, some of that homework too might be even identifying, if someone can come to me and say, Heather, I know that you have partners on boards of my organization in Houston, San Francisco, in Atlanta, and I think it's something that might interest your people in Chicago and Dallas where we overlap too, that gets my attention. And I know it's a specific ask. Now I know where to direct them to. I can connect them with someone in Dallas and Chicago to talk about getting someone on a board there. And it starts to grow. Like, I loved what you said, Emily, about, we were here, we're on our way here, someday we'll be here. It is that patience of working it out over time, the iterative process, as you said.
And that's how you become sticky. So that's how that organization will outlast me. I brought them in,
right,
along with a teammate of mine. We brought them in, but they will outlast us because they are now part of the fabric of what it means to be a female engineer at Lockheed Martin.
Please go ahead. And we have microphones, so if you'll wait for the microphone to come so we can.
I have a question back here while that microphone is going. Hi, everybody. I'm Lynn Filderman. So the world is changing, obviously, as you've all talked about and we're all experiencing. For all of our folks here who are working with us and we're working in the workplace giving and employee engagement, can you dive in a little bit more? I mean, Heather, you were talking about leadership and employee retention and strategic alignment, and you were talking about your focus areas. How are they to think about this as a nonprofit? Because yes, strategic alignment's a different conversation, but all of that activity and energy where we're propelling, talk a little bit about how you see employees getting engaged and how they're looking at it from their standpoint.
Yeah, I love that question, Lynn, because part of the conversation we're having internally right now is what role does corporate responsibility play in purpose, and recognizing that this same evolution we're seeing on a enterprise-wide scale or industry-wide scale, individuals are experiencing, right? That as individuals, we all hit places in our career where it's like, really, is this what I'm going to do forever? I wake up in the morning, I go sit at this desk, I go, what am I doing, right? And helping connect people with their own purpose and what excites them and how they see and this is a shift we see with the growing millennial population as well, that they're not looking at, well, I'll do this so I can do this, so I can do this, so I can make partner in 25 years. They're like, what am I getting out of life right now today? And so when we think about the connection with, say, the 5 public commitments I was talking about, our Earn Your Future commitment is probably our best known, and it's our commitment to youth education on Register with the Clinton Global Initiative. When we enable our people to see easy on-ramps to that, the on-ramp's easy, the work isn't always easy, but make it easy for them to see where to get connected, whether they join a board or they're volunteering with their team in the office or they're meeting other people in the community. Now they're beginning to see, it's what you said, Kim, about taking your skill in your day job and being able to apply it and change people's lives. Like, that's powerful, and that is purposeful, and that's exciting, and that's part of where we're seeing. I mean, I definitely see this in the board seat front, that there are a lot of many nonprofit organizations. Everyone has their own policies and aspirations here, but more and more are saying, let's also look at age as part of the diversity that we want on the board, right? And so there are more and more opportunities I'm finding for my staff who are earlier in their careers to participate in these leadership roles and see how they can mentor, some of us older folks on how to use technology, or just bring a different perspective to the conversation, or think differently about how any organization is making this shift along this continuum. So I think there are a lot of opportunities that excite people that they bring back to everything else they do, and that they're looking individually for the same thing we're looking for as a corporate entity.
When I hear what you say, I think of integration. So people are trying to integrate their busy lives and thread what they do in one place into other places and make those linkages and connections. And I think that's really important to think about from what you have to offer as a nonprofit organization, and engaging people in the causes and how they can bring their talent and their abilities and the resources that they have in their networks into that work.
Absolutely.
I'd also note, though we as a corporation have chosen to focus on STEM and military and veteran causes, and that's where we're putting our corporate resources and our time and our volunteer activities, to create for our employees, because there is some natural affinities there. We're also not naive. We know that that's probably not the personal #1 passion of all 112,000 employees. In fact, they're an incredibly generous workforce. They give close to 20 million of their own dollars away, and they do over 1 million hours of volunteer service. And of that 1 million hours, about 85% of it is for other causes. So for us, workplace giving is that avenue, and some of the other programs we have is the avenue by which we can reward the other personal passions that may not be specific to our company. So we feel that part of our responsibility is to explain why these are the causes the corporation has picked, and while we've been logical and thoughtful, and we are a business, and so we're going to invest as a business, but we know they may not be right for you. So how do we say thank you for what you're doing, and how do we enable you to do it in your own personal life? And for us, that's really what workplace giving brings.
Good, thank you. Question right here.
My question's for you, Emily. And so I'm with Thurgood Marshall College Fund, and you guys have been a partner with us. But we haven't utilized it from the employee engagement side. And so I'm curious, are you using technology to leverage some of the mentoring? So
it's a great question, and I think, so especially in the education space, it's somewhat challenging. A lot of what we focus on is the K through 12 space, and there are a lot of rules and privacy issues associated with that. So for us, it's been challenging. I will say it's something that we really push a lot of our key partners to do, and we're seeing things that don't work, and that's fine, and we're beginning to see things that do, and certainly as technology evolves, I think our ability to do things will evolve. So we are always looking for new ways to do technology. It seems to work a little bit better on the veteran mentoring space, because those are consenting adults. So I have a mentor, she's up in New York City, and we just talk and we change email. There's no issue with that, but I can't have that similar mentoring relationship with a 9th grader trying to make sure she's really excited about doing her math homework tonight. It's just not going to happen. So those are some of the issues that I think we'll solve in the near term, but something that we really struggle with.
Other questions, please.
Sorry. I was curious what your current participation percentage is in workplace giving, what your goals are, and what you've done to see significant increases?
Good question.
I would love to talk about that. So, okay, so we have our roots in United Way campaigns, and 5 or 6 years ago now, we made this shift to, instead of having a United Way campaign at PwC, we have a PwC charitable giving campaign where we highlight our work with United Way and other charities and our own PwC charitable foundation, and then emphasize that there are over 1 million other charities where our people can give. So basically moved to an open campaign. We've moved to year-round. We've moved to, it's the same conversation, but focused in on the employee giving piece of really recognizing that we're no longer in the position of telling people like this is what we're going to do. It's more listening to what are people doing already. What are their interests outside of our goals and programs? What excites them? What are they already doing? And then how do we create easy on-ramps to make it easy for busy people to do that? So by having a platform that's open 24/7, 365, and looking at how do we reduce fees so 100% of our people's money goes to these charities? How do we help the money move faster and faster? How do we help them talk to each other about the fundraising that they're doing? So picking up on all these trends, looking at what are the holidays? Is it Movember? Is it what are the things that they're already excited about, already doing? And then how do we create the forum, the platform, the place where they can interact with each other on this? And so we've seen over those past 5 years, we used to get around a third of our people participating, and our campaign hovered around $10 million a year. And since we've implemented all those changes with a considerable amount of awareness building campaigns to make sure that people were aware of these changes, our 2014 giving landed at 57% participation and $30 million. So considerable growth along with those changes.
How many years has it taken to get to that point?
Basically from 2010 to 2014. So 4 campaigns, if you will, but they're no longer isolated campaigns because we've moved to that year-round.
Emily, do you want to?
Yeah,
respond?
so I would say a lot of the same things that Heather mentioned. We still have a single year, a single point in time. We've been very focused on the rest of our journey and kind of had the mantra, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But I think we're now beginning to say, okay, we've got this all set. How do we bring workplace giving into the conversation? And so I think you'll see us make some moves around being really thoughtful about how we market it and how we talk to our employees in the grand scheme of what the company's trying to do and how we're enabling them. So our employees do about $16 million through employee giving. I don't know the percentages off the top of my head, but it's been reasonably consistent. Our workforce has gone down over the last 5 years, and the numbers haven't changed that much. So it is a testament to their generosity. So while it's remained level, our employee figures have gone down. But we're pretty excited about some of the future and some of the potential of what can be, looking at people like PwC and the great work that they've done. There's really been an evolution in the marketplace.
Yeah, I would like to add too that what we see at America's Charities is a distinction between campaigns when we're involved and we're managing those campaigns, as opposed to campaigns that are not managed by a group, whether it's within the company or whether it's America's Charities. So we're looking at a 5 to 10% increase year over year when campaigns are managed, as opposed to when they are not. So that's one distinguishing point.
Let me also just add, America's Charities, and it's been referenced this morning, America's Charities in 2013 did a snapshot report where we went out and surveyed companies, and we asked specifically about participation. And what we found, of the 100 companies that participated in Snapshot, the average participation was somewhere around 45%. Okay, some smaller, some higher, obviously, average 45. What we found, and we were able to document this, even someone came back and asked us recently, we made the statement in Snapshot that when it was open and driven by employee interest, participation in dollars went up. And we were able to document that employee satisfaction went up, as well as participation, as well as dollars went up. We're going to launch Snapshot 2015, and we're going to go back and revisit that survey. But just to respond to the participation question, and what we see are kind of key drivers of making successful campaigns. Other questions?
Steve, I quote that survey a lot. I love that survey. It's been really helpful.
Great. Emily, I have a question for you.
Sure.
You talked about the nonprofit organization that deals with females, girls, women. Who owns that relationship at Lockheed Martin? Is that?
That relationship is owned by the woman who runs our STEM portfolio and myself, but it's co-owned by our Women's Leadership Forum. We turned it over to them, and this is a group of the top women in the corporation. They get together once a year. It's all the vice presidents and directors of the corporation who are female. And we've turned it over to them, and we've said, would you own this? And will you drive this? And it's been we're on this, we'll start year 2 this fall with them, but they're very excited, and it's gonna make a big difference, and that's the evolution of where we wanna go. And the other thing I will know, you can only do that a few times, right? I can't do that with every single organization out there, so we also have to be very thoughtful about which ones we're gonna do this with. And so the deeper we go, the less we've got time and capacity. But where you start to see results and where you start to see people say, I want to own that with you. So I might write the check, I might set up the structures, and then what I want to do is turn them out and turn them loose.
And that's the embedding it in the strategy of the organization. This is not a side dish.
Yeah.
This is what we do.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. That was I was using that as an illustration of how it's being
great.
embedded in
It's
the
great.
company. So thank you.